Hello girls, so we are starting here the next part from analgesic and antipyretic chapter from your pharmacology and toxicology. So in earlier lecture we had seen what is meant by analgesics, antipyretic, anti-inflammatory drugs, its classification, and also we have discussed first class from the same. That means your salicylates. So salicylates and their pharmacological actions, various pharmacological actions like analgesic, antipyretic action, also effect on respiration, anti-inflammatory and anti-rheumatic effect, also uricosuric effect and metabolic effect of it. Also we had discussed adverse effects, right? So after that we had discussed therapeutic uses of the same. So, where it is used, so salicylates are effective in relieving musculoskeletal pain. Okay, so musculoskeletal pain, that means here leg and hand pain, right? Dose of sodium salicylate and aspirin is zero point 0.3 to 1 gram and can be repeated after every 4 hours. So, sodium salicylate is the salt form of your salicylate. So the dose of the same aspirin and sodium salicylate is zero point 0.3 to 1 gram. Okay, so they serve as an effective therapy in case of rheumatic fever. Okay, in rheumatic fever they are used as analgesic antipyretic medication, commonly used as antipyretic agent, that means fever reducing agent. Also, methyl salicylate is used as counter irritant and rubefacient. Okay, counter irritant and rubefacient medication. Also, salicylates are also used as an anti-inflammatory agent in various preparations. Okay, so pharmaceutical preparation include acetyl salicylic acid (IP), again aspirin tablets, sodium salicylate, and methyl salicylate. Okay, so I will see its mechanism. COX-1 and COX-2, cyclooxygenase 1 and cyclooxygenase 2 enzymes are required for prostaglandin synthesis and ultimately for inflammatory reactions. Why prostaglandin synthesis? Because prostaglandin are secreted after injury happened to your body, right? Uh, but COX-1 is an enzyme which is present in stomach mucosa and other sites of inflammation. See, in this figure they have given where the stomach mucosa lies, right? So stomach mucosa, that means your mucosal layer, inner membrane of your stomach, right? So COX-1, which is also inflammatory mediator or cyclooxygenase enzyme, which is very much important in this reaction mechanism. COX-1 is also required for synthesis of gastric mucus to protect and lubricate the internal mucosa layer of stomach from the gastric acid erosion. See, in stomach there will be always production of hydrochloric acid. Okay, and its acidity or maintaining its acidity is maintenance of its acidity is very much important for your digestive purpose. Okay, or for your digestion of your food particle whichever you ate. Okay, so for that purpose there is presence of always and always gastric acid. And what happened, this gastric acid will directly came into contact with your gastric mucosal layer or stomach mucosal layer. It will cause erosion. Okay, so what will happen after extreme acidity will happen in your body, so your mucosa will get broken, right? So it will lead to peptic ulcer diseases, right? So COX-2 is present in variety of tissues as including site of inflammation. Common NSAIDs, that means non-steroidal anti-inflammatory agents or drugs, and salicylates inhibit both enzymes COX-1 and COX-2, that means cyclooxygenase enzyme 1 and cyclooxygenase enzyme 2, thereby inhibiting prostaglandin synthesis and hence show anti-inflammatory action, because prostaglandins are the chemical agents which are necessary for, or which causes the inflammation, or which are the inflammatory mediators, right? So if we block this prostaglandin synthesis, that means ki there is no any kind of inflammation will be happened. Okay, so but blocking of COX-1 enzyme also inhibit gastric mucus secretion. Okay, so mucus secretion, if we inhibit, what will happen? See, hence gastric mucosa exposed to gastric acid and shows erosion and damage. If there is absence of that gastric mucosa secretions, what will happen? Ki your skin or your gastric mucosa layer will get eroded due to that gastric acid secretions. Okay, so this lead to gastric upset, peptic ulceration, that means ki peptic ulcers and all, gastric bleeding also. See, what will happen ki whenever the erosion of your inner surface will happen, the skin get damaged. Okay, or that broken skin will start bleeding. Okay, so that means ki your gastric bleeding will be happen over there, intestinal bleeding, and so bloody stools. What will happen? That bleeding will cause the bloody stools, right? Therefore aspirin should not be given in peptic ulcers. Okay, so aspirin will not prescribe in peptic ulcer disease. Aspirin is generally taken after meal or in association with sodium bicarbonate, or aspirin is not taken in empty stomach. See, aspirin is weakly acidic drug causing gastric acidosis, leading to gastric discomfort, that means your distress, that is hyperacidity, nausea, vomiting and headache. If aspirin is taken in empty stomach, gastric acidosis shows damage to gastrointestinal tract mucosa and erosion causing peptic ulcer, gastrointestinal bleeding and anemia. See, nature of your aspirin is acidic drug. Though it is weakly acidic drug, but it is having the acidic properties in it, right? So it causes the gastric acidosis after administration. It will lead to gastric discomfort, right? Or upset. Okay, so what will happen? That means ki your hyperacidity, nausea will be happening in that patient's, vomiting, headache and all the things which are related with your hyperacidic conditions. Okay, if any patient will take that aspirin drug on empty stomach, what will happen? There is absence of any kind of food material in your stomach. There is only presence of your gastrointestinal fluid or hydrochloric acid. Okay, so your gastric mucosal layer came into direct contact with your gastric juice. What will happen? There will be formation of erosion or peptic ulcer formation. Okay, or gastrointestinal bleeding will be happening over there. If aspirin is given after meal, this secreted gastric acid is utilized for food digestion process, and loaded stomach avoids direct contact of acid with gastrointestinal mucosa. Sodium bicarbonate, if given along with the aspirin, it neutralizes gastric acid and avoid the peptic ulceration. What will happen? See, in first slide we had discussed how it will corrode our, or it will causes the corrosion or erosion of your gastrointestinal tracts or mucosal layer, rather we can say. Okay, so uh, if we took that medication after meal, what will happen? After meal there is presence of food particles or food material in your stomach. Okay, so it avoid the direct contact of your aspirin along with your gastrointestinal or mucosal layer. So it will not cause any kind, or it wouldn't cause any kind of erosion of that surface, right? And sodium bicarbonate, which is basically a neutralizing agent, acid neutralizing capacity, or rather we can call it as antacid category, right? So if we given it along with your aspirin drug, what will happen? It neutralizes the gastric acidity, right? So there will not be peptic ulceration. Okay. So why aspirin or salicylate therapy is always supported with vitamin K? We'll see its answer. Salicylates causes gastric acidosis. Okay, how we have seen in earlier slides. So peptic ulcer and gastrointestinal tract bleeding at large doses up to 500 milligram. At low dose of 150 milligram, it inhibits platelet aggregation and prolongs bleeding time. Okay, this is the reason behind that we need to avoid that drug or that aspirin in pregnant women's. Okay, so see, vitamin K activates the blood clotting factor, hence initiate the blood coagulation and prevent hemorrhages or prevent the blood loss. So salicylate therapy is always supported with vitamin K. Okay, this is the reason behind this question, why aspirin therapy is always supported with vitamin K, or why the aspirin kind of drugs is always given in conjunction with or in combination with vitamin K. So aspirin is what your anti it inhibit the platelet aggregation, right? So it prolongs the bleeding time. It is undesirable, right? So we need to give it along with vitamin K. Vitamin K activate your blood clotting factors. Acute salicylate poisoning, this is next point from your syllabus. Why it has happened? So we'll see its causes or causative factors. Accidental overdose more than 650 milligram. See, normal dose of your aspirin is 150 milligram up to 500 milligram, depending upon severity of your disease, right? So if anyone is consuming more than 650 milligram, so it will come under overdose. Symptoms will include gastrointestinal symptoms includes nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain associated with your poisoning cases, gastric bleeding and bloody stools. We have seen its mechanism, how the bloody stools will happen in that aspirin therapy and all. Metabolic symptoms include metabolic acidosis or hypoglycemia. Hypoglycemia, that means glycemic acid or level, glycemia is below normal level. Okay, electrolyte imbalance, what is this? Dehydration. Okay, electrolyte, that means your intracellular extracellular electrolytes which are essential for your balancing of your body. So there may be imbalance, there may be presence of imbalance. The causative factors or the symptoms include dehydration or hypokalemia, loss of calcium. Okay, next, respiratory symptom include hyperventilation and respiratory alkalosis. Okay, next, cardiovascular symptoms include cardiovascular collapse, your heart system will get collapsed. Central nervous systems symptom: tinnitus, lethargy, seizures, tremor, hallucination, convulsions, vertigo, and coma. And other symptoms include hyperpyrexia. So we'll see the terms one by one. Nausea, you know what is meant by nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, that means ki muscle cramp or pain which is happening in your stomach or abdominal region. Gastric bleeding, you know, and bloody stools also. Next is metabolic symptoms, metabolic acidosis. So this is the condition when too much acid is produced in your body. Okay, so it can also occurs when your kidneys cannot remove enough acid from the body. Next is hypoglycemia. So in hypoglycemia, what will happen? The normal blood sugar level will elevate, lower down. Okay, the blood sugar level is lower than the normal. Normally the blood sugar level is 70 to 120, right? So in hypoglycemia, what will happen, the sugar level will go on decreasing. Next, electrolyte imbalance, you know what is meant by dehydration and all. So next is hypokalemia. So this is the clinical manifestation happen when your body's potassium levels are too much low. uh, See, potassium is very much essential for nerve and muscle cell functioning, especially the muscles which are present in your heart, right? So, next term is a respiratory symptom, in that hyperventilation. So, we'll see what is meant by hyperventilation. Ventilation, that means ki your respiration. Okay, hyperventilation is condition in which you start to breathe very fastly. Okay, so normally what will happen, the respiration process is always has the balance between inhalation and exhalation, right? So when the hyperventilation happen, that time what will the person do, okay, exhalting more than you inhale. Okay, so there may be imbalance. Next clinical manifestation or the condition is respiratory alkalosis. So this is the secondary term for hyperventilation. So disturbances in acid and base balance due to alveolar hyperventilation will happen over there. Next is cardiovascular symptoms. So cardiovascular system will get collapsed. Okay, so it will not work properly and all the things. Next, CNS related symptoms. So central nervous system related symptoms. First is tinnitus. uh, this is the clinical manifestation, or this is the disease which happened to your ear. Okay, so perception of noise or ringing in ears. Okay, so these are the symptoms of tinnitus. Next is lethargy. So in lethargy, what will happen, the person may feel lack of energy, enthusiasm, and fatigue like condition. Okay, next, seizures. So seizures are also called as fits. Okay, what are those? Sudden uncontrolled electrical disturbances happen in brain. Okay, these are due to neurotransmitter release. Okay, so next is tremors. uh, so tremors are related with your body parts. Okay, how? I'll see. We'll see. Involuntary rhythmic muscle contraction. Okay, this is completely involuntary, not in our hand. Okay, that's why called it as involuntary rhythmic muscle contraction. It lead to shaking movements in one or more body parts, like shaking of or vibration of anyone or more body parts. Next is hallucination. So hallucination is a condition, we will see, we are going to see it. See, a perception in absence of external stimulus that has qualities of real perception. Okay, so the things which are not real we are seeing, or we are feeling that scenes, right? Convulsions, you know, convulsions are also called as seizures and all the things. Next, vertigo. So in common language we call as chakkar yede. Okay, so vertigo, it's like sudden or internal or external spinning sensation, often triggered by moving your head too quickly. Okay, next condition is coma. So prolonged state of unconsciousness, this is called as coma. And last term is hyperpyrexia. So hyperpyrexia is nothing but pyrexia, you know, fever, right? So hyperpyrexia, very high fever. Generally, our body temperature is 35 degrees Celsius plus minus 2 degree. But here what will happen? In hyperpyrexia, more than 41.5 degrees Celsius, our body's temperature go on increasing more than 41.5 degree Celsius, or 106.7 degree Faraday. Okay, so these are the conditions, clinical situations. Nextly, we'll see treatment. Treatment is symptomatic and it include patient should be hospitalized immediately. Next, gastric lavage to eliminate unabsorbed drugs from the stomach, or gastric emptying. Okay. Next, temperature is brought down by external cooling with cold water sponges. We are going to provide sponges, cold water sponges, that to reduce the fever of that person. Next, activated charcoal 1 gram per kg. According to this equation, we are going to calculate the dose. 1 gram per kg may be indicated in massive overdose, in large overdose, ideally within 1 hour of ingestion. It absorbs the aspirin in the gastrointestinal tract. Next, intravenous fluids such as dextrose 5% are recommended to increase the urinary output. So we are going to do the diuresis to remove the excess of that aspirin. The IV fluid should contain sodium, potassium, bicarbonates and glucose to treat hypokalemia and acidosis. Blood pH should be monitored. In severe cases, forced alkaline diuresis with sodium bicarbonate and a diuretic like furosemide is given along with IV fluids. Sodium bicarbonate ionizes the salicylates, making them water soluble and increases their excretion through kidneys. Okay, this is also one excretory mechanism to eliminate the accumulated salicylate from your body. Next, diuretics must be given to increase urinary elimination of salicylates. If hemorrhagic complications are seen, vitamin K and protamine must be given to prevent hemorrhage. Okay, if after taking that overdose, or after happening that overdose conditions, what we are going to do is providing that patient with vitamin K and protamine, to prevent the hemorrhagic conditions. Hemodialysis can be used to enhance the removal of salicylate from blood. Hemodialysis is usually used in those who are severely poisoned. Okay, so this is all about your first category. So we'll stop over here.